Hi everyone, this is I'll Show You Mine If You Show Me Yours by Kris Nicholson. If this is not what you want, then you're in the wrong place. Enjoy.
Thanks. Hello everyone, welcome. Thank you for coming. So let's talk about code reviews. So if you look online, you're going to find a host of various methods and terminology for the right way to do code reviews. In traditional software, we're going to keep it pretty simple. I'm just going to make a few suggestions based on what we've found works for us for game development. So we're going to cover really quickly from the basics. What is a code review? Why do code reviews at all? What are the benefits? Who should be doing code reviews? So that's what kind of teams and who in the team. And how. So just a few little tips and tricks to help you run them smoothly. Just a little quickly about me. My name's Kris. I'm a senior developer at Cerebral Fix. I've been in games for over 12 years now, and I've been at Cerebral Fix for 9 of those, or just over. So this is us. We're a team of just over 60 now. We work on a variety of projects, mostly contract work for clients. The good thing about that is you get to kind of see what processes and tools that other developers are using, and you can kind of pick and choose the best of those for yourself. So we started code reviews around 5 years ago. So we picked up a project where we were working directly with the client's team, and they were already running code reviews as part of their standard process. So we just had to fall in line with that, and that was what we did. But we found pretty quickly that we actually quite liked what we were seeing when we were doing them. So we rolled that out. Basically, the next client project we had, we kind of wrote it into our proposal for the project as well, which kind of helped bolster our professionalism and help us win more projects, and just kind of carried on. And we run it in all of our projects now. So what is a code review? Really basically, so a developer has a suggested change list that they want to push into the code base. Like you might have fixed a bug or developed part of a feature. And then you have one or more developers who are going to read the code, and they might suggest some changes or they might just approve it. But basically, after that point, you as the developer and the reviewers are going to go back and forth a little bit, and either adjust the review or come to some agreement until your reviewers give their approval. So there's a few different ways of doing code reviews. The most common, at least for us, is definitely tool-driven reviews. So if you're using Git, you'll be doing pull requests, and you'll be reviewing using your hosting software. So that's something like GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket, there's a bunch. And then if you're in Perforce land, Swarm is a really good tool for this as well. It's basically the same kind of thing. Generally, you'll have a tool, one of these, where you'll be able to see the new changes as a diff, and you'll be able to comment line by line with any suggestions, questions. And tool-driven reviews are very, very versatile. They're low impact. They're good for remote working, obviously, because you don't need to be in the same place. And they're good for sharing with the whole team at the same time. Then we have over-the-shoulder reviews, which are a bit less common for us, but this is where the reviewer sits right next to the developer, and they take them through their changes. You might still be looking at the diffs, but you might also be able to see the end result working, like the game or the tool. So yeah, less common for us, but they can be really good for those difficult to review ones. And then group reviews, honestly, this is not something we've really done too much. We've seen them done, but this is where one developer would take a group of others through their changes, maybe in a meeting setting. And it could be good for like really critical architecture changes, or just if you need to kind of inform the whole team how to use something. It could be good for that. So why are we doing code reviews? So probably the reason everybody would think of immediately is error detection. And really this is just about making sure issues don't make it into your game for players to see. Because as soon as that happens, it'll affect things like reviews, It could affect your income if there's in-app purchases involved. It's just a really bad time. So obviously QA is also going to be finding issues, but with a code review, if you can spot something, you can fix it in 5 minutes. If it's up to QA, they're going to raise a bug. That bug's going to go into a backlog. It's going to get triaged, and then eventually a dev's going to pick it up. Could be a completely different developer to whoever actually wrote the code in the first place. If this is a couple of weeks later, that connection between the code that you wrote and the bug is just gone. So you have to start from scratch and figure out how that bug got there. And then just kind of a more minor form of this is any temporary logs or code that someone may have put in. So we all know that feeling when you run the game and all of a sudden your log's just screaming with all this position data. It's like, what is this? Where did this come from? If you're code reviewing, you'll see that pretty quick. Another good reason for code reviews is just to improve your general code quality, your code base. So firstly, when you know that others are going to be looking at your code, you usually stop for a second. You go, they're going to think I'm really dumb if I don't change this or something. Like maybe I should just go that little bit extra and just fix this little thing. So that self-review is actually a really important part of the process as well. And I mean, people might do this without code reviews, but this kind of becomes more natural. And it just stops you from pushing everything you've got. It's like, I'm finished, push everything. Improved readability. So because you wrote your code, you know how it works. But are you going to know how it works in a couple of weeks or a couple of months or a couple of years? So by showing it to someone else, they're actually in a really good position to be able to tell you if they think it's readable. And then at that point, it could just be a case of restructuring or changing a parameter name or two. But the most common kind of improvement I see is, your code's self-documenting, which is great, but just an extra little comment here and there can just kind of help to make it more understandable in the future. And then finally, it gives you an opportunity to enforce coding standards you might have, like naming conventions, spaces, tabs. But if you can, probably try and automate those things, because it'll just make your code reviews that much simpler if you don't have to pick up on every little tiny problem with your standards. So there's some good linting tools and bits and pieces that can do some of that for you. Knowledge sharing. So this isn't just about juniors learning from seniors. The reviewer's going to learn something by reading the review, and the writer's going to learn something from a reviewer's feedback. That sharing goes both ways. There's a couple of types of knowledge that you could be sharing. There's knowledge about game systems. So obviously the reviewer's going to learn that the change was made in the first place, and maybe that's not a good thing, who knows, and how that change was implemented, so they'll know going forwards. But the writer might have misunderstood that, there's already a system for this, or no, that's not how that works, and it's just a really good time to fix that. And then there's just kind of more general technical knowledge, like, you could use this pattern here, or, did you know about this language feature, or that kind of thing. And that kind of brings us to the conference theme, which is adaptability. Teams can change, someone can get sick, sometimes for long periods of time. You might have team members moving between different teams, and having just that little bit of knowledge sharing might give the rest of the team a better chance to actually pick up on that work. There's also some more kind of subtle team benefits that you get from code reviews that you might not have thought about. Code reviews are in themselves a form of communication, and extra communication is usually a good thing. Team ownership. So when you're writing code in isolation, it's very easy for that code to become yours. You can get very protective about it. You might have written some system, like a level chunking system or something, and you can be very proud of it. But it doesn't mean that you should be the only person that can work on it. And code reviews just kind of let other people in, both to kind of have input and improve their understanding, and just to kind of understand that it is the team's code. Everyone is responsible for it. It's not just for that one person. It becomes the team's system rather than one person's system. And code reviews are a really good opportunity for feedback. A lot of the time we don't really stop to understand what other people have done, and to actually give them some feedback on what they've done. So obviously constructive feedback is going to be pretty natural, but it just gives you a chance to praise good work as well. A little, this is really well designed, or thanks for removing this old code, I was going to get to that. That can go a really long way. And hidden conflict is kind of one of those things that can happen if people are working in isolation, where you might not agree with the way something's been done, and by default you're not necessarily going to have a chance to actually have any input. But with code reviews you have that chance, and it gives you that opportunity to go away and actually discuss what the best approach actually is to a problem. Without those discussions, that conflict is still there. It's just kind of hidden. Someone could go and tidy up some code that someone had just written, but actually it was very important and to be the way that it was. So having that point that you can talk about it is really good. It can be a little uncomfortable if you're not used to being open in your team, but that's kind of something I think you just need to work on, and it gets better with practice. You get better at it, and overall you're just going to have a better team dynamic once you've kind of gotten all that out in the air. All right, so we want to do them. Who's going to do code reviews? So what kind of teams and who in the team? So who should be a reviewer? Your first instinct might be that a senior should be reviewing the code, and really that's kind of up to you as a team to decide who the required reviewers for your team should be. So it could be one review from anyone. It could be that it needs to be a senior. It might be you have different developers responsible for different systems still, in which case you might want that person who's most knowledgeable about something to review it. And that can happen kind of naturally as well. Like, you might submit some code, but that someone else recently actually touched that code, so you might ask them specifically, hey, I just touched this thing you wrote, can you just make sure it's still working, or it makes sense. And it's kind of up to you as a team to see what works for you, but at Cerebral Fix we generally just need one acceptance from anyone in the team, and obviously we'll call out if there's something specific, but yeah, we find that seniors and juniors are getting something out of it, so it makes sense for everyone to be involved. And of course multiple people can as well. It doesn't have to be one person. But I'm the only developer on my team. So if you happen to work in a studio with multiple teams, find a buddy. Join up with another team, especially if that team also happens to be a single dev team, because then you're kind of getting mutual benefit. You can review each other's code. Not only does it mean you'll have someone to review your work, but it can actually be just really helpful to have someone else to talk to, someone to bounce ideas off if you're isolated on your team. It can be really helpful. And again, improves your adaptability. If you get hit by a bus, maybe someone might be able to pick up where you were off. Cool. So there are a lot of articles and talks about how to do code reviews of varying quality, but I'm not going into too much detail. I'll just run through some recommendations based on our experience. So this is what we live by, basically, that every code change should be reviewed. Not just important ones. It's just very easy for things to slip through the cracks if you're trying to decide this one's important enough and this one's not. But it's only one line of code. I mean, these can often be the most important commits. Like, if it's worth committing on its own, it's probably something important. Not always, but it's still probably important enough to review. And even if it's not, it's going to take 2 minutes to review. It's not an issue. But we're behind schedule. We don't have time. We don't have time to do code reviews. But if you're thinking of skipping your code reviews, it probably means you're rushing. And that's kind of the time when you make the most mistakes. So it's actually more important to keep your reviews going, even when you're behind schedule. And once it kind of becomes part of your normal process, it's just kind of natural, and it feels weird to skip it. So you just kind of take it into account with the work that you're doing. My teammate's out sick, and they're my only teammate. Well, okay. Now it's getting hard. You might be able to get some from another team, but, at an absolute worst case, you can integrate it, that's fine. Just make sure that when they get back that they have a check over it as well, just to make sure everything's kosher. So what about data? We're doing code reviews, right? Not data reviews. So let's say you have some text-based data, so something like XML, JSON, or YAML, and we would say yes, do that as well, because data can be just as powerful as code. One small typo can break the whole game if you don't have very good error detection on that. And then if that data is generated by a tool, that data can get pretty messy, maybe. At the very least, though, having a little skim can actually be valuable anyway, even if you're not looking at it every single line, because that's pretty tedious, but you might just get a rough understanding of, oh yeah, this has changed, cool, all right, cool. Some tips: if you do have some tool-generated data, try to keep your data meaningful. So this is kind of if you're in control of that data, like if it's a tool you wrote, just trying to avoid things like data duplication, and try to have meaningful defaults so they don't actually need to be written into the data. Because often you'll have a bunch of repeated objects or something like that, and if you've got the same things repeating over and over again, it can actually get really hard for the tools to actually diff those, and you can end up with like things getting mixed up, but it's like that's not actually right. So try to do that, and then also try to keep your changes related to the commit that you're doing. So one example of this is with Unity. So every now and then when you upgrade Unity, they'll upgrade kind of their serialization for types of files, so maybe prefabs or scriptable objects or something. And one thing you can do is, if you've made a commit and you've made one tiny little change, you'll see like 20 different changes to the file. It's like, where did all these come from? So what you could do is, when you do your upgrade, go, okay, I'm actually just going to resave all my assets, do that as one commit, get all that out of the way, and then it's done. You don't have to worry about it again. You don't have to see it in any more reviews going forwards. And then finally, just try and keep your data stable. So this is, if you're in charge of the serialization and you're serializing out some floating point numbers and you've got it out to 20 decimal places because you want it as accurate as you can, but really it means every time you're opening up your tool, it just keeps changing. So every time you save it out, all these numbers just keep changing every time. Like, that's just not helpful at all. What if it's binary data or a blueprint or something? It's going to be hard. It can be hard, but there are some ways to help with this. You could try an over-the-shoulder review and go through your changes that way. You could take screenshots before and after. So like in Unreal or Unity, you could take the screenshots and then attach those to the review so people can see what's changed. And failing that, even if you can't see any change at all, like knowing that the file has changed in the first place can just be valuable in itself. It's like, why is this file changed? That shouldn't have changed. Like, what's going on? I did have a thing for that. One specific example of binary data is images. So it's even worth checking these over sometimes. Some tools will show you the before and after, so you can look for any discrepancies. This is my recreation, terrible dev art, of an image we had in one of our games. And some background, this was to represent signal strength. Some background is that this is a sprite sheet, but it's ordered, so you don't have IDs for each frame, it's just 0, 1, 2, 3. And you'll see pretty quick, those 2 frames are in the wrong order. And this would have actually been pretty hard to find in QA, because you'd have to figure out which signal strength you're meant to be at, and then what the image is meant to be. You probably wouldn't find it. All right, so you want to create a review. What should we keep in mind? Keep it small. The smallest change that does the job. It'll be faster and easier, less daunting, and you'll be more likely to find any issues. On that note, if you've made multiple changes, try to split it into separate reviews. So this is quite common if you're developing on a feature and you find a bug at the same time. It's like, oh, I need to fix this now. So you fix the bug. But really what you want to do is keep the bug separate, commit it separately, review it separately. Because if you don't split it, those changes become dependent on each other, and that feature could have a bunch of back and forth, and all of a sudden that bug fix just doesn't end up getting in the time that you wanted it to. There's a couple of things that can help with this as well. So Perforce is quite good in that it lets you organize your file changes into separate change lists, so you can keep them organized. Git doesn't really have that, though. You can do partial file commits, which can be helpful for that. You want to provide as much context as you can about your change. So this is simple things like good commit descriptions, giving the review a good title, and you can also just go through if it's a bigger review, you can go through it and just comment out anything important. It's like, hey, could you just have a good look at this part because it does this thing or something. And yeah, again, if it's a very visual change, you can attach an image or a GIF or a video, which can help a lot. It just gives you that context of what's actually changed here. I don't understand. It's like, oh, I see. Okay. And then finally, share it with the team. Often there'll be automatic notifications by email, but no one reads email. So at CF, we have a Slack channel that we generally put our pull requests into, so that everybody can see it quickly. And one little thing we use to help other people have an understanding about your review is we give it a size. And what better way than with emoji? So we have our really tiny one-line commits, reviews, which are atom-sized, and then we've got mouse-sized, cat-sized, dog-sized, horse-sized, and elephants for those ones you probably should have split up earlier. So if someone in your team has submitted a code review, what should you do? Try and start quickly. So obviously you don't want to break your flow, you don't want to drop everything and go, oh, I need to go do this now, but just try and get to it as quickly as you can. So the next time you've stopped for a break or something like that. Having quick turnaround is important. You want to make it high priority. You don't want your reviews to become stale, because that can quickly lead to merge conflicts and hold up any further work. At the same time, once you've started, don't rush it. Take your time. You're there to find issues. You're there to actually look at it. So don't just approve it, And when you're giving feedback, just be really clear about whether that feedback is something that absolutely must be fixed, or if it's kind of like, oh yeah, it might be nice if you just did this, like if you've got time, kind of thing. Just be very clear about that, because it can change a lot about how it feels on the other end to get that feedback. If you're picking up on every little thing, it can feel really pedantic and like, come on, I just need to get this in. So yeah. It's pretty important to have efficient communication around your code review process. So a great way we've found to help with this is with more emoji as Slack reactions. So we've got a channel and it'll have a list of pull requests in it. And Slack reactions give you a really quick at-a-glance view of like, oh, yep, that's approved, that's not approved. So when you start looking at a code review, you might add some eyes just to say, I'm having a look. So then the other people on your team might go, oh, okay, I don't have to look at that right now. I'll just keep working. Speech bubble for adding comments, and then obviously thumbs up once you've approved it. And you might have both. You might have that you've approved it and you've added comments, which could be those nice to have changes that you've just said, yeah. So code reviews are awesome and we like them, but they're not always the silver bullet. Primarily, if you've already finished some massive feature and you've done all the work, you've spent weeks on the system, and then you realize you made some fundamental flaw and the whole thing is just completely wrong. So don't rely on code reviews for this. You need to keep in mind that there's other things you should be doing, such as design meetings. I put meetings here because it doesn't have to be something formal. It just needs to be a conversation. Once you have an idea of what you're going to do, just have a quick conversation with the other devs and say, hey, I'm thinking of doing it this way. And they might go, maybe, but you could do it this way. It would be a lot better. It's like, okay, cool. Glad we had this discussion now, and then once you've kind of started and you might have a little skeleton of what you're trying to do, you can use a draft review, which is not something you're trying to actually merge in, but it's just an opportunity for more feedback as you're building it. So hopefully I've convinced you and you want to give code reviews a go. But where to from here? So obviously you're not going to be able to do it on your own. So you're going to need to convince some others to go on that journey with you. So you want to gain some buy-in. Ideally, you'd want the whole project dev team to be on board so that you're kind of not worried about how you're spending your time. But even having one dev could be a good start. And if you're still a little skeptical, you could just trial them for a while. See how you like them. Do it for a sprint or a release cycle, and see how you go. You can also start pretty light as well. Like you don't have to provide really in-depth feedback if you don't want to begin with, and kind of bring that in slowly. So quick summary: code reviews don't just help you find bugs; they're good for communication, knowledge sharing, and teamwork. And just give them a go. Thank you very much. Any questions? We got 4 minutes.
No questions? Ooh, here's one.
Hi. Oh, Mike's coming.
Bit of a specific question. What do you do if you're the only developer in the whole company? Which is in my case.
I knew this question was going to come up. I've actually thought about that. I didn't make a slide for it because I wasn't too sure about it. But like in theory, you could buddy up with another studio. But I don't really know what that looks like in terms of copyright and stuff. Like you'd have to be pretty trusting or have some good arrangement. But I think in theory that could be a good way to go. You're not going to get the system knowledge. Like that's not going to be very helpful. But you're still going to get the just the general knowledge, and obviously finding issues and things like that. And you might also bring in the camaraderie and stuff as well. And again, someone to bounce ideas off. Like just that cooperation could be good in general. But yeah, not sure if it would work.
Hey, thanks.
Got time for one more question.
One more.
Hey, Kris.
Hello.
We already work together, so I'm just going to put this out there. How do you organize it when you have artists and devs and designers all needing to do code reviews?
Yeah, no, that's a good question because we do have a project where that's the case, and so I'm not on that project, but from my understanding, the code reviews still happen. They're still being submitted by artists and designers. I'm not 100% sure on what the requirements are for them, but yeah, like there's no reason why artists and designers can't also be in that process. It might be that it's reviewed by another artist or designer. I mean, any eyes are good, and you might also find having a developer to look over it could be good as well, just to make sure that they haven't broken anything. Yep. Cool. Feel free to reach out by email if you want to ask me anything else. Great. Thank you.